Where we are in James, James has brought us to that gnarly place where money and the human soul meet. And as is his habit, James will use wisdom writing to get his readers thinking. The nature of wisdom literature in the Bible is that it doesn't give us a lot of specifics. The way it's intended to work, especially how Hebrew wisdom literature works, something is said about a particular subject, and what we're going to be looking at this morning is specifically money. But just enough is said to get us thinking. Often it's given to us in the form of a riddle or just a very brief sentence. It's intended to get us thinking, and it's intended to get us thinking together so that we're not just sitting down analyzing it, studying it on our own, but that we're talking with each other about it, and together it's beginning to teach us. And so this wisdom teaches us, and then it teaches us again. And then it teaches us over and over and over again. And over a lifetime, it just continues to teach us. And that's what it's intended to do. And as we make moral choices, these choices help us relate to people the way we're supposed to relate to people. And as we do, we get better and better and better. And in time, we are conformed into the image of Christ. And so what James is telling us this wisdom does is what he's already said in verse 4 of chapter 1, where he said, "Let endurance have its perfect results so that you may be perfect and complete, lacking in nothing." That as we go through life and these things in our soul are corrected, as we endure through that, we become complete and perfect, lacking in nothing. And so James is doing this for his readers. He's doing this for us this morning. And he's doing it with verse 12. And James 1:12, he gives this summary wisdom of where money and morals meet. What's interesting, he doesn't say anything about money in this sentence. And yet, this is how he will conclude the previous verses that do talk about money. And here's what he gives us: that God blesses those who patiently endure testing and temptation. Now, this testing and temptation can be in anything, but in particular, this testing and temptation that he's talking about here has to do with financial testing. When we're tested about our money, our values. And he says, God blesses those who patiently endure testing and temptation. Afterwards, they will receive the crown of life that God has promised to those who love him. And let me just point out that what he's really stressing here is not so much how we manage our money, But the more fundamental question, do we love God more than we love money? Let me read the larger passage. It begins in verse 9, where he says, believers who are poor have something to boast about, for God has honored them. And those who are rich should boast that God has humbled them. And they will fade away like a little flower in the field. And the hot sun rises, and the grass withers, and the little flower droops and falls, and its beauty fades away. And in the same way, the rich will fade away with all their achievements. But God blesses those who endure testing and temptation, and afterwards they will receive the crown of life that God has promised to those who love him. So what we're going to do this morning is see how this works. I'm going to give you a little background of what's going on in this book that James is writing, this letter that he's giving us. And what it is he's trying to say. I'm going to use the phrase somewhere in between to help us imagine where we are. He's going to talk about poverty, and there's something we can learn from the poor, and we need to learn it. There's something we can learn from the rich as well. There's some wisdom there. Most of us are somewhere in between. Some of us may become rich. Some of us are going to go through a period of time in which we're not sure how we're going to pay the bills. And things are going to really be tough. In both of these situations, there's a testing that's going on. God's going to use those situations to bring up things in our soul. And it's going to force us to ask some tough questions. And the fundamental question is, what do we really love? Do we love God more than we love money? Or do we love our toys and insist on having them more than we love God? Let me give you the backstory on what's going on in this letter James is writing. James is pastoring these Christians who are going through these really difficult times. Jewish Christians in Jerusalem are beginning to be persecuted. And those who are in Jerusalem have been persecuted to the point where a host of them have left the city and are now scattered throughout northern Palestine. Some may be in Syria, Damascus, and so forth. Their circumstances are really tough. Their faith is being tested as much or more as when they were in Jerusalem. And some may have lost whatever wealth they had earned and saved while they lived in Jerusalem, and now they find themselves broke. And so they're working like slaves for wealthy business owners in northern Palestine or Damascus and other places they fled to. And they struggle with a combination of resentment and envy. And James who has remained in Jerusalem, is pastoring the remaining Christians there, and he's having to teach them what he's just written in this letter. They both need it. We need it. James himself is feeling the pressure and the difficulties that he and his family deal with in this hostile city. In the first verse of this letter, he had said, "This letter is from James, a slave of God." Now, he could have said that in good times, but he was keenly aware of how it felt to be obedient to Jesus, to be loyal to Jesus when things are really tough and when money is really tight. And so he describes himself as a slave of God and of the Lord Jesus Christ. The Christians who have remained in Jerusalem are needing the same help and the same teaching that James is writing in this letter. Finances are getting tight for everyone. Giving is down, we presume, to the local churches. And as a result, the financial situation for the church is growing tighter and tighter and tighter. And James is needing to pastor these people through these tough times. And as I thought about this, I realized I'm needing to pastor people who are somewhere in between. How does the wisdom that James is giving these people apply to where we are right now? He's needing to help them know how to make sense out of the stress and the strain of the growing poverty. He's needing to help them also make sense out of their tendency to waffle in their faith. He's needing to help them avoid their growing envy of the wealthy. And he's needing to help them answer the question, where's God in all of this that I'm going through? And James knows that if they will endure this, if they will sort this out over time, here's what's going to happen. They're going to be able to say, "Blessed. God has blessed me as I've gone through this tough time. God has blessed me as I've patiently endured testing and temptation. And I look forward to something. I look forward to receiving the crown of life that God has promised to those who love him." River, my job this morning as I pastor us is to call us to a simple point. That we be a people who love God over our lifetime, and that we love God more than we love money. In a time when it is so easy to love money and the things that money will buy. So what's James giving us in verse 12? Well, first of all, if you've been with us, here he's saying again what he said earlier in verses 2 and 3. And he said it several times in verses 2 and 3, where he talked about testing and he talked about endurance. That God is going to put us in testing times to show us what our soul loves more than anything else. And that's what testing does. If you're purifying precious metal, you put it in heat, and the impurities rise to the surface. And that's how you get rid of them and leave it purer than it was before. He's going to let us go through some tough times. Some of those times are going to be when there's little or no money. Some of those times are going to be when there's more money than we know what to do with. What he's doing is he's showing us our hearts, our souls, what's there. What's pure and good and needs to be kept. And what's really selfish and stingy and covetous. And what needs to be repented of and gotten rid of. And as we endure these things, and that's a key word he uses, this is not something instant and automatic. This is something that we hang in there. We choose to go through these things. As we do this, we trust that God cares for us, that God is paying attention to us, that he knows exactly what we are experiencing. Jesus himself experienced these things. And he will bless us for our patience and endurance and our love for him, and he will reward us with a crown of life, which is eternal in nature. And this crown is given to those who endure testing, especially those who love God more than they love money. This crown of life, as James wrote that phrase, the people who read it would have instantly thought of one of two things, or maybe both of these things. One would have been the royal crown that had been placed on royalty, kings, princes, princesses, and so forth. Crowns were also given to people who won in athletic competitions or who won military engagements. And so it was a victor's crown. It's not specific as to which of these he's writing about. He's just trying to help them imagine that you and I, if we will resolve that our life mission is to love God, and we're going to love God more than we love money, that this crown is given to us. There may be one sense in which we experience it now. The ultimate sense, or that time when we experience it, will be in eternity. And so as I have to answer the question, how do I pastor people who are somewhere in between total poverty and more money than we know what to do with? One of the things that I need to do, and I'm reminding you of this morning, is to call our hearts to love eternity. That our hope for this time when this crown is given, there would be this robust hope that we have for eternity. Our imaginations of what heaven is like so captures us that we look forward to being there, and that we lay up our treasures in heaven rather than our treasures here on earth. Let me give you a few passages that talk about this crown. Revelation 2, verse 10. Do not fear what you are about to suffer. Behold, the devil is about to cast some of you into prison, so that you will be tested, and you will have tribulation for 10 days, but be faithful until death. I will give you the crown of life. 2 Timothy 4, 7 and 8, Paul writes this. He says, I have fought the good fight. I have finished the course. I have kept the faith. And in the future, there is laid up for me a crown of righteousness, which the Lord, the righteous judge, will award to me on that day. And not only to me, but also to all who have loved his appearing. Peter writes this in 1 Peter 5:4. And we had mentioned this last Sunday when we talked about the commissioning of new elders. He's talking here about our diligence, our faithfulness to shepherd well. But he writes here about Jesus. He says, when the chief shepherd appears, you who have been faithful leaders in the body of Christ, you will receive the unfading crown of glory. It's a future thing, but it's a real thing. And River, he wants us. He wants us to need and want this crown more than we want anything else. He wants us to have a robust vision of eternity. The crown that James speaks of here is for those who love God more than they love money. Now, James is going to give us wisdom that we can gain from the poor, wisdom that we can gain from the wealthy. And he begins by saying this about the poor. And remember, this is wisdom literature. He's not going to say much. He's not going to give us a lot of specifics. He's going to give us just enough to get us thinking about it, chewing on it, and discussing it with each other. Verse 9. Believers who are poor have something to boast about, for God has honored them. Wow. What's in this? You know, if we go back to the beginning of this letter and just draw insights that he's been giving so far and ask the question, what if these were applied to those times when we don't have enough money? We're not sure how to pay the bills this month. Well, what he said so far is don't let stretching financial times rob you of your joy. When you go through those times, count it as all joy. I know what it feels like. There have been times in our life. There was one time in particular I'll never forget. I was employed at a campus ministry here at the university. Had to raise my own support. Sometimes the contributions were plenty. There were other times it was really tough. And there was one time I opened my paycheck and there literally wasn't enough to pay the rent. And I had to answer the question, will I crumble under this, or will I count it all joy? Second thing he's given us so far in this letter, let financial strains produce Christian character in you. Let those times when money is tight produce something in you that's enduring. Cooperate with it. Verses 3 and 4, he says, for you know that when your faith is tested, your endurance has a chance to grow, so let it grow. For when your endurance is fully developed, you will be perfect and complete and needing nothing. And he's talking about character. Third thing, as you go through those tough times, go to God for wisdom over and over and over again. God is so delighted when you come to him and ask for wisdom. Verse 5, he said, if you need wisdom, ask our generous God, and he will give it to you, and he will not rebuke you for asking. Well, we haven't exhausted all the wisdom that you can gain as we go through tough financial times, or as we observe the lives of godly poor people. But I've just given you enough to get you thinking, and that's what wisdom is intended to do, is to get you thinking. I know a man, he's my age, and he has figured this out. He lives on limited income. He has a crippling condition that has left him living in a wheelchair and in a small room in a care facility. And I've gotten to know this wonderful man. And when I'm with him, he is content. He is grateful. And he is generous with what little he has. And River, this man writes a check to this church every month. And this man has a robust hope for heaven. And so every time I go to see him, I have to kind of get myself ready. Because I know there are two questions that he is going to ask me every time. And the first one is, Dave, how are you doing? You know, he's more concerned with the needs and interests of other people than he is in himself. This man has really tapped into what Christian love feels like and acts like. And so I have to get myself ready to answer that question, because I know he's going to ask me, Dave, how are you doing? How's your family doing? There's a second question he will always ask. And he asks me, how are you doing? He says, tell me about the church. This man cares for you. He cares for River Church. And I leave those times, those visits, instructed by this man's life. God has given him something beautiful. It looks like Jesus to me. There's wisdom we can learn from the godly poor. What's the wisdom we need to learn from the wealthy? James had written, for those who are rich should boast, not about their riches, but that God has humbled them. They will fade away like a little flower in the field. The hot sun rises and the grass withers and the little flower droops and falls and its beauty fades away. And in the same way, the rich will fade away with all their achievements. It's fair to ask, who are these wealthy people that James is talking about here? Are these Christians or are they non-Christians? And if you read the scholars who write on this passage, they're not sure. The grammar doesn't really answer the question. And so we don't want to get too dogmatic about whether it's one or the other. My take is that he's not writing about Christians who have a lot of money. But the wisdom applies all the same. James makes it clear that to all of us who have ample resources, and let me just interject here, many of us do, and so we need to take this passage very, very, very seriously. Many of us will. That if things stay fairly stable in our economy, we have the potential, many of us, of making a lot of money, especially those of you that are students. You have the possibility of making an enormous amount of money. If God gives you a lifetime, that's sort of the average lifespan in America, when you come to the end of it, will you love God more than you love all that money? Will you be like my poor friend? Will you be content with a little? Will you have a liberty in your soul to give and to give and to give and to give? To give to the ministry of your local church. To donate to world missions. Or here in Norman, will you be giving to collegiate ministry? And will you be giving in whatever way you can find to help the needs of the poor? Whether that's the poor in this city or whether that's orphans in Africa. Will the joy of your life be not how much can you hold on to, but how much can you store up, but how much can you give away, and therefore how much can you be laying up in heaven? A treasure in heaven that's there because you gave. Will you tap into what Jesus said in Acts 20:35? It is more blessed to give that money than it was to receive that money. Thank God that many, if not most of us, have been given the ability and the opportunity to earn far more money than we need. Thank God for that privilege. If we don't, James warns us that the rich will fade away like a little flower in the field. Hot sun is going to come sooner or later. It's going to wither us. Our little flower will droop and fall. Its beauty will fade away. And in the same way, the rich will fade away with all their achievements. So what about those of us who are in between? We're probably not poor, but we wouldn't consider ourselves rich either. Well, James tells us, God blesses those who patiently endure testing and temptation, and afterwards they will receive the crown of life that God has promised to those who love him. When we go through those experiences of financial testing and temptation, do you receive it as an opportunity to go to God for wisdom on, God, how do I deal with this so that it produces character in me? And you're asking, how can I find and express joy as I go through this time? And how can I grow in loving God more than I love money? And how can this experience strengthen a robust hope for heaven? River, take verse 12 and chew on it. Let it feed you and let it shape your soul so that you love God more than you love money. Let me pray for us. Father, would you grant us the grace that would make us into giants of character, of generosity, of love for you, rather than the love of things. And so would you test us and try us? Open our eyes to see what you're teaching us. And then help us join you as you purge our hearts from discontent and ingratitude and greed and covetousness. And would you replace it with joy, gratitude, and a generous love that looks like your love? And we've asked this, Father, in Jesus' name. Amen.